You're righty there, fellow mini painters and lovers of all things Oldhammer related, and welcome to another video from Nostalgiahammer Hobbies. And in this video, we are going to be starting something truly epic with a new journey. So I do hope you enjoy. The Epic gaming system started all the way back in 1988 with the release of Adeptus Titanicus. This game actually came with 6 of the Warlord Titans in there, so you could battle against your mates, 3 aside or 1-on-1, with massive weapons in a cityscape. And it really did look like quite a lot of fun. Now unfortunately I missed this. But what I did come into though was the release after this, which was Epic Space Marine. And this is where you got a lot of more troops and tanks in there. But from what I've heard, eventually this started to lean away from the Titan-based combat that was in Adeptus Titanicus and focused more on the troops, which was an awful lot of fun, but after a while I hear it started to make it very difficult to actually field Titans. And so they after that then released Epic Titan Legions. Now this is the game that I really did start to see things with. I never actually owned it, and it's one that I missed back in the day, but I always did love the models, especially the Imperator Titan and Orc Mega Gargants that came in there. And this version of the rules was basically the same, apparently, as Space Marine, but with a few tweaks that made Titans more usable, and it also added in some more rules for flyers. And after that, they released their final one, which only came out in 1997, and this was Epic 40k. And it seems that this one was not at all popular, and it's what actually, unfortunately, it seems killed the game system. I'm not sure why, but it really did. Now, I don't really feel as though I'm ideally suited to go into the background and the fluff of Space Marines, because there's another channel out there called Crown of Command who has done it a lot more credit than I think I will ever be able to do. So what I will do, if you are interested, is in the description below I will put a link to the Crown of Command channel so you can go and have a look at it. He's got some podcasts in there which really do go into it, the background and a lot of the rules, and that is really, really good and worth a watch. What I am going to do is I'm going to go into how I build and paint the army that I'm going to be eventually using, hopefully, against Rich from Bring and Battle Wargaming. Now I'm going to be doing a Chaos army using Khorne and Slaanesh to begin with, which is a very interesting little mix which you can do for Epic. I'm going to go into some of the rules for the models that I'm using, why I'm picking to use them, and then I'm going to go into how I've painted them up. So I really do hope you enjoy. The forces of Chaos in Epic are built all around their actual greater demons to lead them. And with them you have a load of minion cards that you would have go alongside them. So you'd have things like trolls as well as your demons, demon engines, space marines, you've got beastmen. You've got quite a few quite interesting choices that you can take for Epic that you don't normally see. And it also doesn't have the restrictions that 2nd edition 40k had with using Chaos, where certain powers would not like each other and they would have animosity if they fought alongside each other. In Epic, you don't get that, so you can actually mix and match your gods so long as you have the greater demons to go along with them. Now I'm going with a force of Khorne and Slaanesh, mostly because this army is being done to go against Richard's Eldar from Bring and Battle Wargaming, and he's asked for a fair bit of close combat. Now I'm actually going to start using Slaanesh, because going up against Eldar, Slaanesh are the perfect ones to begin with, I think. And there's going to be a lot in this army with your greater demons, demon primarchs and all sorts. But to begin with, what I'm actually starting with is a load of demon engines. And demon engines are something that Chaos actually get a fairly decent access to. And they bring all sorts of stuff to the table that they can use. Now, because I'm also using Khorne are quite good for close combat, but one thing that Chaos lacks in general in Epic is long-range firepower, or sometimes just general heavy firepower. So the reason I'm actually taking Slaanesh as well is because the Slaanesh's demon engines are demon knights. And my thinking behind bringing the demon knights is that these guys are hopefully going to be able to provide some long-range firepower that my Khorne forces are otherwise going to be lacking. I'm going to be taking a couple of types of these ones for this army, but to begin with, the ones I'm going to be taking are Hellstriders. Now these are actually the smallest of the knights that you get for this, but they still count as a vehicle or walker. Now one of the things you get in Epic where it has vehicle and walker, you also have things like super heavies and knights and titans. And the thing with that is that if you're in close combat, anything smaller than you can't actually hold you in combat, so you can just stomp past them. So these Hellstriders are actually quite vulnerable when it comes to that. However, one thing that they do come with, or rather two things that they come with, is a melter beam and a las cannon. Now, las cannons in Epic are a bit different. For a start, all the ranges in Epic are actually done in centimetres rather than inches. But a little thing that I do when I look at the centimetres is I just transfer it through to inches, which is usually 2.5 centimetres to an inch. So a las cannon's got a 50 centimetre range, which is roughly 20 inches. It is a bit less than that, but it's close enough for visualising purposes. Because another thing that you've got in Epic is it also has no pre-measuring, just like 2nd edition 40k does. You basically declare your targets, measure it up, and then if you're out of range, that's it, your shot's wasted. So for me, that just makes it a little bit easier. I'm sure there are Epic players out there that are chomping at the bit saying how disgraceful that is, but it works. The other beam that the Hellstriders have is a melter beam. Short range, only a 25 centimetre range or a 10-inch range roughly, but it is quite good for taking out things with shields, because it's got a -2 save modifier and it hits on a 3+, which isn't too bad. So I'm hoping these guys are going to be able to deal a little bit of firepower, and because they're quite quick, I should be able to hopefully get up there and be able to use it, because it's fairly short ranged, but up close I should be able to do some damage. And here are the actual Hellstrider models themselves. They've got a really nice colour scheme, and I'm hoping that people are going to find this quite interesting to see how I've done it. So let's get to the painting desk and see how we do it. First thing I did for painting these was to give them a primer layer of pure white. I used a rattle can for this, but you can use anything you like. You can use a paintbrush, airbrush, whatever you want. And after that, I'm going to take a mix of 4 parts contrast medium to 1 part volupus pink. And I'm going to use that to go over all the body part areas that I want to be this softer pink colour. And where we're going to be trying to use some very soft pastel-y colours, it pays to be as neat with this as you can. You also want to try and keep this coat as smooth as you can. Try not to get any balling or tea staining on the main surfaces. The next area I'm going to move on to is these little sensor nodes on the side of the weapons, as well as these little what look like weapon mounts on the top. For that, I'm going to use Force Blaster Green. These tiny little tubes down the side of their legs, as well as the tube on the underside connecting to this sort of, I don't know, whatever it is, like weapon sort of mount, I'm going to use Baharoth Blue. These little bits under the knees, as well as they've got little bits just round the back, I'm going to do these in Dawn Yellow. For the melter beam barrel, I'm going to use Lothern Blue. For the small Slaanesh symbol on his left thigh, I'm going to use Blue Horror. Next up, I'm going to do his little loincloth that he's got. And for that, I'm going to use contrast paints Gorbrunter Fur. When I'm doing this, I'm also just going to do this straight over the small chains that are hanging down the front. Now, this is the part where I'm going to have to be incredibly careful. I'm going to do all the remaining areas are going to be metallic. So for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take contrast paints Black Templar. And I'm going to start by using that to go over all of these areas first. Now, you're going to want to be very careful when doing this, so get your thinnest brush that you've got. I'm actually using Green Stuff World's size 0 for this. And just be as careful as you can be to not get any of this on the areas that you've already base coated. Because if you do, where we've used such bright and soft colours, you're basically going to have to go back and re-prime that whole area in white to redo it. Because you can't really just go straight over that area with a small little patch touch-up when you use contrast paints. Now thankfully these models aren't very big, but this is one of the areas which being very patient pays. Just taking your time and going around and doing it. And there we go, that's the black finished up. Done as neatly as we can, and there's not really got anywhere else, which is exactly what we want. From there, I'm going to move on to Vallejo's dark gunmetal. And I'm just going to put that over the majority of these areas. I'm going to be leaving the hooves black and a few other bits left black as well, where I'm going to be doing them gold details. I'm not going to be doing the chains with this though. Since some of these details are quite small, just use whichever size brush you're comfortable using. And it's just a case of going around the model and picking the bits that you like to be this metallic colour. Once I've finished with that, I'm going to do the bronzy areas, and for that I'm going to be using Vallejo's Bright Bronze. And then to finish off the base coat, I'm going to use Vallejo's Chain Mail. And I'm going to use that to pick out a couple of chains that they have on the model, as well as use it over some of the areas of the gunmetal that we've already done. And I'm just going to do that by picking out some of the more visible raised areas with this, so it brightens it up. Now for washes, there isn't actually that many to do on this model. And I'm going to use a couple of older paints to begin with that GW used to do. The first one is a glaze paint they used to do called Waywatcher Green. You might be able to get something like this if you use contrast paints Warp Lightning and really heavily thin it down with Lamy Medium. But I'm just going to use this over all the Gauss Blaster Green gems that we've done. This isn't really a wash, it's more of a, well, as it says, a glaze, and it sort of tints the surfaces. And this one's just going to make it a little bit of a richer green. And you sort of start where you want the colour to be lightest, and then drag the Waywatcher Green down into where you want it to be darker. Then for the couple of blue areas we've got, like the melter beam muzzle and the pipes on the side, I'm going to use Guilliman Blue Glaze. And again, this one can probably be achieved if you take contrast paints Talisar Blue, and again, very heavily thin it down. I'm just going to use this in the same way to sort of try and guide it down into the dark, into the recesses to make them darker. The little yellow piping underneath his knees or anywhere else, if you've chosen to do that, I'm going to use GW's Cassandora Yellow wash for that. And then the final wash is going to be some Reichland Flesh Shade, which I am going to do over the bronzy areas. To begin the highlights, I'm going to go back to Gauss Blaster Green, but reapply it over these sorts of sensor nodes and the gun turrets. And I'm going to try and leave the bottom part of them this slightly darker green. It's a very subtle effect using the Waywatcher, but it's still quite nice. And then to finish off that, what I'll do is I'll take a bit of white and I'll mix it in with the Gauss Blaster Green until we get a much brighter sort of shade, and just do a little sort of a highlight around them. And for this part here, I will go back to Lothern Blue and just reapply it again to brighten it up a little bit. You can skip these steps with the Lothern Blue and the Gauss Blaster Green if you want to, because the old glazes tint the surface very little really if you use them the way I have initially. So the difference is quite minimal. I'm then going to use a bit of Baharoth Blue to highlight just the little edge of this weapon here, as well as the muzzle rim. And whilst I've got that colour still on the wet palette, I'm going to use it just to go over these little bits of piping down the side of his legs as well. And then I'm going to go to Baharoth Blue, with a little Slaneshi symbol on his thigh, as well as to apply a little bit of a highlight to those pipes down the side of his leg. And then I will go back to Bright Bronze and reapply that over some of the more raised areas of any of the areas that you've done that colour previously. And now for the pink. To highlight this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some Fulgrim Pink, thin this down a bit more than I normally would do so that it's almost a glaze, and then use it to go back over where we've done the contrast paint initially. What you want to do is drag this up towards where you want it to be brighter and patiently go over it. Doing this will help you to cover up any areas if you've got it a bit thick and had a bit of tea staining. And what I'm going to do is, on areas such as these weapons on his side, I'm actually going to leave it darker down on the bottom of it, So it looks like there's a bit of a transition going up. And then to highlight the pink, what I've done is I've mixed some white in with the full grim pink, and I'm just going to pick out a couple of edges. And there's not very many on this model at all. And once this has been done, all you've got to do is the base, and then this is finished. And here is the finished Hellstrider with all of his companions. Now this is actually 2 cards worth, because you get 3 per card. And I'm thinking of bringing these for the first battle, because they have some pretty decent firepower. Not massive range, but decent nonetheless. I am thinking of changing it up a little bit, so one of these groups of 3 might be changed out later on for something a little bit different. And there will be some videos on painting that as well. The pink that I've done for the armour on these guys is actually quite a lot brighter than the pink that was originally shown in the White Dwarf. But I quite like this more pastel-y look. It looks a lot brighter and a little bit more Slaanesh-y to me. But if you did want to go for the more darker sort of pink that they've got there, I reckon Emperor's Children would be a pretty good substitute and build up from that. But like I said, with this I actually quite like the pink, and I like the green on the sensor nodes as well. All these lot combined, they're really nice and simple models, and I actually managed to get these all painted, barring the one that I used for the video, in about a day. And you can manage this quite quickly, especially with contrast paints. And if you're not bothering with the end of the edge highlighting, which considering how small they are, you don't really need to do it, but I think it looks quite nice. You could get these easily done in a day. And there we go. That is the first video of my new Epic series. I apologise if the beginning of this seemed a little bit rough around the edges and not quite right. But I'm just getting used to the Epic background, lore and fluff, so I'm catching up slowly, and I promise that I will improve in the future. There's more to come in the future as well with Epic. I've got some more Slaanesh-y Demon Knights, some Chaos Demon engines, as well as troops, Greater Demons, as well as some of the Primarchs to do, so I do hope you'll stick around for that in the future. If you look in the description below, there will be a link to my website where you can have a look at some galleries and possibly even price lists if you fancy getting a commission done, as well as a link to a Ko-fi account if you want to do something with that. No pressure, you don't have to at all. If you are enjoying the content that I'm putting out so far, why not give us a subscribe and hit that bell icon so YouTube actually notifies you of when I've got content coming out. And that way as well, the more subscribers I have, the more YouTube will think that people out there like seeing the content, and the further it will go. And with that, thank you very much, keep smiling, and keep the old hammer alive.